I'll see if I can get her.
Okay, so I hadn't planned anything for introductions because I wasn't sure how many people were going to be here. But anyways, welcome everybody. This is the last of our Friday film nights for Asian Heritage Month. And they've been all so totally different. And had some really good discussions going on. Sorry, I have to also admit people. I wanted to do a land acknowledgement first before we do anything else. And we gratefully acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded ancestral territory of the Coast Salish people. And we give thanks to the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations here in Vancouver. To you, the viewers, wherever you are, take a moment to recognize whose territory you are on. And if you don't know, take time to find out. As well, the BIPOC Caucus, which is putting on these film nights, which is to acknowledge and thank the Vancouver Unitarians for being such amazing supporters for this whole endeavor. And I just need to do a little blurb about who Unitarians are. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. We have no shared creed. Our shared covenant supports the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We are called to action around racial justice within our congregation, ourselves, and in collaboration with our community.
Thank you.
Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Tamiko. I'm Cynthia Lam. I'm one of the co-hosts for tonight, and my co-host is Diane. Diane, please say hello.
Hello, I'm the co-host.
Yes, thank you. Well, this is, as Tamiko said, this is going to be the last of the 4 film nights for this month, Asian Heritage Month. And I have heard, apparently, some people who have organized the Asian Heritage Month in the past 20 years have found that this year was the most emotional for them because so many things are happening. So yeah, so when I was trying to figure out what kind of film I should try to put on, I said, well, let's try comedy. And some people have given me some suggestions and some samples too. I said, okay, we just chose a few. And I mean, comedy humor is quite subjective and sometimes culturally different too. So, but sometimes humor can bring some light moment and can also be quite effective. So I hope that everybody have had a chance to watch it. If not, that's okay. Just join in and share how those comedies have touched you or how you feel that, what's kind of reaction. So just feel free. And this it is being recorded as we do with the rest. But if you don't feel you want to be recorded, can you let me know now so we can turn it off or we can do something about it?
Just turn off the video, your own video.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you can turn it on your face, turn off. And I also have Catherine Hembling. She's so kind to help us. Yeah, Catherine is right there. And to do the QA and also the chat box. So do put in your questions or your comments, and also feel free to speak up during the discussion. And I guess you probably all know we have this reaction box on your screen at the bottom, and you can put you can put your hands, raise hand, and when you finish, you lower hand, right? Thank you. So, well, Diane, let's hear what you may want to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Cynthia. I think that you have chosen a really, really exhilarating trio of films. I was so disarmed and inspired by all 3 of them. And I must say, well, I have questions that are generated from these films that I'll share with the group. But I'll just start with the first film. Where Are You Really From? First off, I have to say that I hats off to these performers. I'm in that racket, and I think these folks did such an excellent job in comedy. Comedy is very, very difficult. It looks easy, but it's very, very difficult, especially the subversive kind of comedy that I think these folks are going for, and the bravery of all of them to use a genre that is typically dominated by white men telling really, really awful sexist jokes. To take that genre and turn it on its head and make it empowering was really, really thrilling.
Yeah.
So I just loved them. But my question would be then for those who this is, appropriate, could anybody here, because for me, the first film was really about the intersectionality of racism and sexism. So can anybody here speak from their personal experience to that intersectionality as it is revealed in the first film, and anything at all about this? Is it something that you've experienced a lot? Do they always go hand in hand and are equally insidious? Whatever you want to say, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Do you want to hear it now?
Yeah, from
Diane?
Yeah, we can start now. No problem. That's what the time is for.
It's Mina here.
Hi, Mina.
Hi. I just had it today, actually.
Oh, good. Fresh on your mind.
It's at 12 o'clock. I was attending this group, and there's only 2 female, 4 male. And immediately, I didn't even turn my camera on. It was my standard photo that you're seeing right now. And immediately, this one man asked, "What is your nationality?" I said, "Canadian." He said, "No, that's not what I mean."
Yeah.
And then he said, "Just looking at your photo, I was wondering." And I said, "You mean my ethnicity?" And I said, "I'm Chinese." And then I asked him, I say, "What about you? Where are you from?" And it turns out all 3 men, all of them came from England.
Okay.
We're all born in England. I don't think they were like the guy who asked me first, but he was taken aback actually when I asked him where he came from.
That sounds like what she did in the film.
Yeah. But I don't know about other people, Asian women here, but I find mostly men asking me, "Where are you from?" Very rarely women would ask me, "Where are you from?"
Yeah.
Tamiko.
Yeah.
I totally agree. It's a vast majority is men, and so there is a lot of sexism involved. I got a lot of it when I was younger, and I think these guys would come up and say, "Hi, where are you from?" And they think that's a great pickup. It's a pickup line, and they think it makes them look like they're really well traveled and they're educated just by asking this question. And because I have always been taught that you be polite and you answer the question, I do, even though it just got more and more irritating. And I had assumed that it wouldn't happen as I got older and wrinkled. And I actually got asked it at a UUA meeting by a Black minister. And I really wanted to say, this is actually a problematic question, but I just went back to my old way and I said, well, my background is Japanese, I'm Japanese Canadian. And, but it was interesting because I started to think you would never ask it of a white person because the standard is they're Canadian, right? And unless they had an accent, it wouldn't even occur to ask. But you also wouldn't ask a Black person because the answer could be really problematic. You'd be opening up a can of worms, if they were from slavery or, something happened. And so people don't ask Black people, but it's the beigey, brown, everybody else. It's open season that you can ask them. Yeah.
That's really interesting, Tamiko. Megumi has her hand up.
I think, for me, I'm as a recent immigrant of half a century, but soon after I came from Japan, many people, not very many immigrants, new immigrants from Japan or Asia at that time. So most of the people are Caucasian. So of course, they ask me where you are from, right? Then to me, no, nothing, of course, they ask me, I just accept it. Then I say I'm from Japan, Then once in a while, people been to Japan, like particularly like air industry people, they've been to Japan more than I do, I've been Hokkaido, Okinawa. I was really impressed, But anyway, point is I try to me, it's not offensive question. But for example, Tamiko, she's the fourth generation, right? Mm-hmm. And probably when she was young, she never been to Japan. Then she was saying, "Where are you from?" Right? I understand that. And also, Linda Uehara, she's a founder of the Power Street Festival. She's one of the organizers. And also later on, Sawagi Taiko's. She's great. She's older than me, but she has so much energy. She still does. But I think that I thought she was second generation, but the third generation she is, I found out. But point I try to make is, those Japanese Canadian, second generation, third generation, they are born here, but they are fluent in everything. But their look is still, recent arrival immigrant like myself. So until they open their mouth to speak fluent native English, people think they are, Caucasian, non-Asian. They think, for example, Linda, she's recent arrived Japanese, Chinese. So they start wondering. We try to be like Canadian, Caucasian, try to mingle into the Caucasian culture, everything. But then we're still thinking, where are you from? We are not part of the white community, So that's why they say, started the Power Street Festival. And that's 45 years ago. And now they are doing such a great work now. I'm now advertising Power Street Festival organization, but that's the frustration, second, third generation, they are still regarded as a foreigner, not, part of white dominated Canada, US, America too. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess just a reminder to hit, so Catherine, you're trying to keep track of hands, I understand, aren't you? If people could please go to their reactions buttons and put their hand up, then Catherine knows who's next. Does anybody else want to speak to, well, there's so many things here now. Catherine has a question in the chat. A teacher that she used to know, or that she does know, asks everyone she meets, where were you born? I was taken aback, but it made a good conversation for me. Is that any different? So that's Catherine Hembling's question. Does anybody want to address that? I can't see any hands. Catherine, can you?
Well, I can try to respond. I think that's the difference between Asian and the Western people. I think vis-a-vis the question, where were you born? I mean, to speak for myself, actually, where was I born, or where is anybody born? Does not really tell me so much. For instance, I was born in Boston. That's in the States, but I left when I was 2, and then went back. I went to Shanghai for 2 years, and then I grew up in Taiwan until I was 20 years old, and now I've been in Canada for 50 some years. So but I guess you're right, Catherine, that it's make a conversation, but it doesn't really tell you so much about very much, you know. But I know on all the documents there was a place of your birth. To me, it's always like that here in the Western part of the practice. But somehow I don't think, to me, it doesn't tell me too much, because for me, it's especially nowadays, so many people are so mobile. They may be born in one place, but they go over so many other places, multiple of identities.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think Debra's next, and then Michael.
Michael. Yeah, I think my thought on it is the reason it's inappropriate and insensitive is because when you're a visible person of a Canadian visible person, it's always been assumed you're not really Canadian. You know, I mean, and so I think that's what everybody has to recognize, is that's why it's just you know, not appropriate. And, you know, as you get to know people, they'll offer what they want of their journey. What was positive, what was a celebration, what was traumatic, what still is traumatic. And so, you know, I think that's something to keep in mind. So,
yeah.
Michael, still?
Can I add
something? Small talk can be difficult. I mean, I don't like small talk, but when you're first meeting somebody, you know, and in the case of guys flirting, you do get into some pretty dumb questions, you know, like, you know, you from around here? Where do you work? Gee, you know, that's a nice pair of shoes you're wearing. You know, and I think there are times when, you know, asking people about where they come from, you know, I find there are many times when I have to ask white people where they come from. I have a daughter in South Africa. I have a son in New Zealand. So I, you know, run across somebody who's got a funny accent, and I can't tell the difference between South Africa, New Zealand, or Australia. Those accents all sound the same to me, but it's important to them. Don't, you know, confuse a New Zealander with an Australian. So I might, you know, ask them, you know, where they're from, and they say, oh, well, Coquitlam, and I'll say, yeah, but I mean, that accent, where are you really from? You know, because I want to dig a little deeper, and if they say New Zealand, I'll say, oh, great, I happen to have a, you know, grandkid in New Zealand. So there are times when the question can be, you know, benign, superficial, and, you know, it's helping to get to know a person, you know, rather than an indication of racism or xenophobia or something more sinister.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think within the context of the film that we saw, it was clearly on the more negative side, but I hear you. Does anybody else want to respond to this question? The intersectionality of racism and sexism, or do you want to move forward, Cynthia, onto the next film or another question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to share a bit of my feeling too about this kind of question. I always identify myself as Chinese Canadian because just my look and my accent, and perhaps my, you know, I still carry my cultural heritage. That could be very different from the Western, but at the same time, because I've been here 50 some years, I'm of course having absorbed and taken in a lot of Western values. So, but still, I think I'm more like a biculture, and I'm more comfortable with that. So if you ask me where you're from, well, it does help to find out that person's intention, you know, before you know, just go ahead. But it's the tone of voice, the kind of facial expression that you can pick up the vibe. So you have to adjust, adapt the questions accordingly. Okay, let's move on to the second one.
I think Diana would like to speak.
Hi, everybody. I am very grateful that you have taken up this subject in this time. And I think I'm not from Vancouver. I'm in Montreal. Cynthia was the one who introduced me to this series, and tonight I decided that it was a subject of passion for me, and why I have been so involved. Well, I'm in Montreal, as involved as I could in the community. It started off, I can understand this question, where you're from. Well, they hear my strange English accents and they can't figure out where I'm from. And I think sometimes they think they're paying me a compliment by saying, oh, you speak good English.
Yes.
At least I can understand you. So they ask this question. So I brush it off as kind of a compliment, and I don't take it too harshly. However, the one question that started me going, and I think I've harped this to Cynthia's ears for many times, is that one incident when I was going to vote for a little subject in my little community in my city, and the clerk asked me, "Are you Canadian?" Because apparently that is one of the conditions for voting. And I said, okay, casually I said yes, and both my husband and I are landed immigrant and turned Canadians. But my little curious mind looked at her, and she went down the road for people, and apparently she only asked us. And that got me going, and I said, again, my big mouth said, how come you only ask us? What about the others? Well, whether she's trying to take a shortcut or whatever, she answered and said, I know a Canadian from a non-Canadian.
Yeah.
So that got me going. And the next morning I called the mayor's office, or mayoress at that time, and she couldn't answer me. I said, you have a problem here. She didn't know how to respond to this question. And from that day onwards, I realized that I am not Canadian in looks. So, and I have colleagues who are Italians and whatever, and they are not Canadians by citizenship, but I'm sure they would have not been picked up by this. So then I asked the question myself too. In those days, there were not many Chinese in the little town or city that I lived in. So I kind of said, well, I can understand why she thinks that I'm a little odd. And that got me going and said, well, I think we have to educate our host country that we are part of this fabric, that we need to show them that we are as Canadian as can be. And therefore, I go to all these multicultural meetings and I ask the hosts. In Quebec, as you know, the big issue here is French and English and others. So they then said, the typical word is, you guys have to assimilate, you have to integrate. They don't use the word integrate. That was an even worse term that they used before, but anyways. But then I tell them, I said, my French is not very good, but I think my children will be able to speak proper French. And I'm willing to eat poutine. And but my question to the other side of the spectrum is, when are you going to accept us as part of the Canadian community? And I believe that we have, as the minorities, have to be here to show that we belong, and we want to show that we will be here to stay and contribute to this country. But then the big question I ask is, how can we do this? When will they get rid of this prejudice? What can we do? It's not just 1 month of Asian Heritage Month. It's not one day of a cultural show. What steps can we do to do this? In Quebec, of course, one of the biggest problems is our history books are all written slanted. And I think we need to do something about education to change the history books, that the minorities have contributed greatly to this country. And I urge you all to help us to do this. That is why I'm here tonight, because I think this has to go across the country, not only in Quebec. Therefore, I urge you, encourage you, persuade you to carry this issue with you. And I'm happy that you have brought this issue, because this is something that is very dear to me, and I want this to be solved, to be resolved, that in our next generations that we be part of this fabric. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. Yeah, Diana has
I've just added a question there, Diana. You must find that very painful and very infuriating at the time. I can see that you're engaged in doing long-term things, but how do you deal with that at the time when something like that happens?
Well, I think at that time, I kind of resolved myself and said, well, it's in a way that they are not used to seeing these faces. And then I resolved it as saying, it is not her fault in that, well, it's not, they're not used to seeing faces like this in a whole white community. Therefore, it's obvious. It's like, what's the word? Profiling. I mean, as they say, when you go through the airport, when you are after 9/11, everybody that has a name like, whatever his name is now, I can't remember, Osama, stop him, right? I mean, you don't think that there's another Osama that can be a good guy. So in order to save the effort of asking everybody, and you just make the assumption that everybody that looks the same must be Canadian, and everybody that does not look like your typical stereotype of a white. Therefore, I have come to that conclusion that it was, I don't want to use the word ignorance, but the lack of knowledge of what could constitute. And I think that sensitization is very important in, first it has to start from the leaders to go down the line. It is not at the grassroots, they may not be aware of this. Another example I can give is like whenever I happen to help in a Chinese school, and every time we have an event and we invite the whether it be provincial or the city or whoever, but the leaders, but they will brush it off. Oh, it's just Chinese school. They don't count a lot of votes. And they don't bother to tell us. They'll say, oh, I'm coming for the event. And then we make space and then prepare for them and all that. And then they last minute don't show up. They don't want to tell us. I mean, if leaders can be like this, what do you expect the underlings to think? And this is the type of sensitization that we need to bring forward. Sorry, I'm taking too much time.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Diana. I think in terms of, education, you're so right, and leaders taking responsibility. In terms of the context of this evening, I find that these entertainers, if you will, are doing very subversive, important educational work as well. I think that through stand-up comedy, you can really impact people much more than people think. Theater can be such a powerful tool for political and social change. But I don't want to waste any time talking about that. I'd like to hear other folks' ideas. Or Cynthia, would you like to move on to the next film?
Sure. The next one is the black lady who was, she said she's lived in Taiwan 12 years. So she's speaking very, very fluent Mandarin in her speech. And she was telling us that, after all these years, she's still being looked on as a stranger, as a foreigner. And then when she goes back to her mother in the States to visit, her mother said, "You are Taiwanese." But obviously, I think she intends to stay in Taiwan, and she's reaching out to the Taiwanese audience to say, if we try to look at strange people or things as normal, the strangeness will fade away. That's the theme of her speech. So yeah, what do you think?
Well, I was going to throw the question out there for anybody. I agree totally, Cynthia. It was very powerful. And her making the strange normal. I was quite impressed by the hypocrisy that she could so easily reveal in terms of how people, other her. They other her because her hair is different, her skin is different, her teeth are different, her weight is different, and all of these things strike me as incredibly personal. And being objectified in such a personal way is obviously kind of a violation. And I wondered, again, this crossover between sexism and racism, if anybody could speak to that. Is this happen to men, or is this kind of objectification something that people feel so, it seems to be, they give themselves permission to comment on women's bodies a lot. I've had it for years, not anymore because now I'm an old lady, but when I was a younger person, man, I was harassed every day, many times a day. And I'm white, so I can't imagine if I had been Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, how much worse that might have been. Would anybody like to respond to that?
I have white men coming up to me and touch my arm, my forearm, and stroking it, and they say, "Oh, your skin is so smooth."
Oh, terrible! Wow.
And today I was actually at this meditation and the mindfulness exercise, and one of the one part was you're supposed to touch your forearm and your face, feel the sensation. And when I touched my forearm, I had this very unpleasant feeling. It's because I've been touched there in a very unwelcoming way. So it actually, instead of comfort, it gave me this extreme discomfort. I have to use deep breathing to bring myself back down again.
What is your response to that, Mina? Do you have a response in the moment that works for you, or is this something you still struggle with?
I usually just retract my arm at that time when I was younger, obviously. Thank God now I'm older and the men don't seem to be that interested in me. Mind you, the last year I haven't been out much, so I would try it out I would go to the bar and see what's the result. But now I'm ready to kind of tell them off. What do you think? You do that to your mother? You do that to your sister?
Is like sort of dehumanizing, like you're some kind of pet or something. Anybody else want to share or have any observations? Debra.
Thank you. I just am responding to the comment you put on, Diane, as well. I think that I know, I can't remember if it was Tomiko that made the comment that she's not sure that Black people get asked the question as much as Asians, but I think they do. I think that anybody that's not white will be asked, where are you from, and so on. And then just in terms of men's bodies, I was a little bit uncomfortable in our last, when we get to our last comedian, when he was referring to Black men and making a joke about large lips and why couldn't he have large other parts. So, I mean, I was just a bit uncomfortable when a person of one nationality or ethnic group is, I mean, we're fair game for ourselves when we make jokes about ourselves, but I think when we're outside of our own experiences and identities, we tread on tough ground. And I guess I'm speaking because I have a Black son-in-law and I have a mixed race young son, grandson. So yeah, I think that Black men do, that stereotype was around for quite a while. So I just wanted to add that. I do think that every non-white group, men and women, are targets for certain kinds of stereotypes. Thanks.
I see Michael has his hand up. Michael?
Yeah, I came from the U.S. in 1968 with the help of the Unitarian Church of Vancouver. So thank you, 50 years ago. But Canadians, I found, have a peculiarity about not being like Americans. That's part of their identity. They don't want to be like Americans. So when they find out that I'm Black, oh, they're very nice to me, you know, almost to a fault. Now, that's not to say that Canadians aren't racist. I mean, you know, they do some nasty things, bad comments about East Indians, Native Indians, and sometimes, to make sure that I don't get treated like somebody with brown skin, I will, speak very articulately and use rather lengthy multisyllabic words to prove that I'm not, a poor English speaker. And so then, that's an intersection with class. You know, I have a certain education level. So Blacks in Canada, sometimes Canadians bend over backwards to not discriminate against them, oddly enough.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Cynthia,
yeah. I like to share a little bit of my experiences. I think maybe you people can also share how you feel. I think the privacy, the notion, the concept of privacy or private questions, the definition of that are quite different between the East and the Western world. For instance, when I went to visit China, as a tourist, and then because I haven't dyed my hair for a long time, so people are very curious to try to find out what's my real age, because people very often, the Asian women do not like to not dye their hair color. So till they're quite old, they still have a very nice darker color. But I just hair, but I just haven't, I stopped coloring for a long time. So they are very curious. They just in the store, they will say, hey, just a very common exchange, and then say, how old you are? How old are you? There was one time I was even hiking, with my family and the local guide who showed us the way. And a group of local people, they were looking at me because I like hiking. I still go fairly fast, and they look my hair. So they keep, they are talking among themselves, and they thought I do not speak or understand Chinese. So they asked the guide, how old? So to the Western people, age is very private, but in China, they do not feel, in general, of course, they just, age is age. They're curious about your income too. Yeah. So these are sort of the common differences, and also, I don't know, I didn't feel so offended looking at the Black lady being people saying that people touch the hair or the teeth and the skin. Because if I remember when I was in Taiwan, if I saw the foreigner looking very different, I either avoid or just being polite and just no contact. But the way she's talking about it, as if she's been the people are quite familiar and quite friendly. So they've had some kind of relationship for a while. So the hair, yeah, the skin, yeah. But that's just my own reflection. There's some differences between the concept, the notion of privacy, or the features, or you cannot touch, or that, it's not, there are differences, but yeah, it's for all of us to explore and find out.
I have Debra, Catherine, and then Tomiko.
I can wait because I've already spoken once on this one, so I can wait till the others are done.
Catherine and then Tomiko. Thank you.
So what I was going to say was I've experienced being a minority in West Africa, where there was never any white colonization. And I was working in a teaching school, a science teacher, and it was a boarding school, and the girls were, lived in dormitories. And I had the same sort of experience, but I think the curiosity is always there, but how people express it is different from culture to culture to culture. Because in West Africa, it took the girls more than a year. And then they sent a delegation to talk to me and said, we know you wash your hair, but would you mind letting us see you when you washed your hair so that we could touch it? So I said, oh, sure, because I'd been there a year and I knew that they were just really curious. But it took them a year, and they sent a delegation to ask permission first. So culture to culture, I think some of these things are very different.
Thank you, Catherine. Tomiko?
What I really enjoyed about that video was just the contrast between what my preconceived ideas of I seeing this Black woman, and yet here she is fluent in Chinese, in Mandarin. And I'm sure that it must have just totally thrown the audience, that particular fact. And then she starts to make fun of all of her observations. And I saw that when I met a daughter of a German missionary who'd been in China and grown up there for 20 years. And she spoke English with a heavy, heavy Chinese accent. It was, I just like, that just blows my mind. But Catherine, you reminded me of, I was hitchhiking across Uganda in the 80s. It was a little bit dangerous. And so all of us travelers would get hitch rides with the truckers because there were no buses running, and we didn't want to just be out on the road. And unfortunately, the guy that was driving the truck I was in was getting a little bit too amorous and aggressive and all that. And then I noticed that on his dash, he had a picture of Bruce Lee. And I said, oh, you're a Bruce Lee fan. Oh, yeah, I've seen all his movies. I said, did you know that he's my brother? And instantly everything changed. Like he at the next pull-off, he totally dressed in his like karate outfit to show me his moves. He was showing me around the village, Bruce Lee. But I just totally played on the whole preconception. All Asians know martial arts, and the only Asian that was in Uganda must be Bruce Lee's sister.
That's really
that's funny.
Debra, you're next, I think.
Thanks. Yes, I was just going to make a similar comment to what Tomiko said about the brilliance of that comics. Speaking the fluent Mandarin, and it did jar us enough out of every kind of stereotype it was. I mean, I don't speak Mandarin, but she sounded like a native Mandarin speaker to me. Obviously, she probably wasn't, but I think that making the strange normal was besides everything she did and said, was the fact that she could speak the language like she did. And I just wanted to then qualify my comment about comics. I feel uncomfortable if they're making jokes about not their own race. That doesn't hold against the oppressors. No, they're fair game. Like the first one, when she turned it on the British, asking the questions about the British. So I think, again, it goes to social relationships and just being aware that there's always somebody who is going to have power given to them by virtue of the different discriminations and stereotypes that have been attributed to different people that have been less powerful. So Catherine, even though you said West Africa wasn't colonized, I still think as a white person, you still probably had more social status than might be, you might have recognized you had?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
And that played out in flirtations and sexual innuendo and stuff. But a beautiful looking white person, like somebody from Scandinavia with long blonde hair, was considered to be a really status symbol wife by politicians and tribal elders as well. Yeah. So there was racism for sure. Yeah. But
and I wasn't aware that West Africa wasn't colonized. Did they? Yeah. They stole slaves from West Africa, though, didn't they?
Yeah, but
yeah. So that's
people, yeah, but that's another question, another story altogether.
That's equally bad. Sorry, Megumi, your turn.
no.
Yeah.
I try not to talk too long. My personal experience about the reverse discrimination. I don't know if I can say like that. My own experience, I'm married to English Scotch Canadian, descent Canadian, my late husband, Ted Anderson. But before we married, I sent my letter. At that time, telephone was so expensive, so mainly letter. And I like to marry to Ted Anderson, who is Caucasian. We say white, Hakujin, Gaijin, foreigner, But anyway, my dad, I was so surprised my dad's reaction. He opposed it. The reason is, I don't want to have a grandchild with blue eyes. That was his reaction. But anyway, took a year before I tried to convince my parents and my future husband, really nice guy, so they agreed. But then it turned out to be, we had a baby daughter. Her eyes are not, her eyes color is not blue, but brown. But very fortunate, we went to Japan when my late husband taught English for 2 years. So we lived with my parents. In Tokyo, so expensive. But they accepted us, right? That was the best time we ever spent. And as a result, my daughter was 2, and then by the time we came back 4 years, Japanese became mother tongue, Then just my parents adore our daughter, and she had a really good time with her Japanese grandparents, So after that, just a great experience. Then also, of course, my late husband, Caucasian, right? So then I think, that's part of it. He was very well received by my parents, but also Japanese, But anyway, that was my experience.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
I can't, as I'm a co-host somehow, that I can't raise my hand. I just want to make a comment following Megumi about her parents worry about kids having blue eyes. It happened to some of the Chinese families as well. And they want to keep the so-called family blood pure. And part of it because the racial discrimination they get from white or other races. So they feel that if these people come into the family, that they will be made feel inferior. So instead of suffer that, they would rather keep the blood pure. I have a friend, Todd Wong. He's been he's a 5th generation Chinese Canadian. And he organized what they call Gong Haggis, the Chinese New Year Gong Haggis Fat Choi banquet. It's a mix of Scottish and Chinese kind of a celebration. He's 5th generation, yet his family doesn't have a drop of any other race. And I asked him, I said, how do you keep your family blood so pure? He said, racism.
Yeah.
And we see so many mixed families now. To younger people, race is almost like not a big deal. But I think for older generations, they suffered a lot of segregation and racial discrimination. That is a lot higher barriers for them to have that crossover, because they were not allowed to cross over.
That's right. Hi, Diana.
I'd like to speak to that a bit. I think it is not only with mixed marriages of color that is the so-called the parental concern. I think it is a matter of communications, because I think as an in-law, you like to be able to speak to your in-law and not be shut out and you can't communicate. Well, my brother-in-law tells his wife, my sister-in-law says, it's good if you cannot understand my mother, because that reduces the friction. They are both Chinese, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, but they are of different dialects. And believe it or not, the Chinese, the dialects are very difficult to understand each other. The husband is Fujian, and my sister-in-law is Cantonese. And the two kind of don't mix. For some reason, they have been brought up very insular in that one doesn't understand the other. So much so that there was a relatively big problem, because my sister-in-law couldn't understand her mother-in-law. But her husband thinks that's a great thing, because then you don't have any fiction, because you don't understand each other. But I think a lot of parents do not like this mixed marriages because of this problem. I think it's less of racism, but more so you want to have a continuity of culture of so that the generations can still communicate with the grandparents. Because even my kids, when we tend to speak English at home, so when my kids were young, we tend to speak English because there was this other influence of French. So by the time I brought my kids home to my parents-in-law, they were shocked and said, what is this? All Chinese people speak Chinese. So I think there is that concern, and I think that is more so than being racist. But I do agree that all of us have this little category box in us that we want to say we are this, we are this, we are this. And even among the Chinese, when they meet each other, the first thing they ask, where are you from? They want to pin you down to the province and to the village where you're from. I mean, now, of course, China has no more villages, but I mean, I used to be very proud that I tell everybody I'm Chinese and by origin, and then I'm from this province, and then they're still not satisfied and say, you're from that province, but where? You know, I don't know, because I've been probably 3 generations out of China, so I can't tell where my village is from. So they get shocked to say, you're Chinese, you don't know where you're from. So I think this question is not only when between 2 different colors, but also within the same.
I think within the same race, it's not racism. You cannot, like, I'm Chinese, I cannot be a racist against you being a Chinese as well. That's what my understanding is.
I'm sorry. In this case, I have to tell you one little anecdote again. Again, I'm involved in this Chinese school at one time. I'm sure you know Taiwan and mainland at one point in time longer ago, probably in the 90s or thereabouts. There are more Taiwanese, at least in Montreal, than mainlanders. And one day we were having dinner together, and there were only 3 mainland Chinese teachers and probably 10 Taiwanese teachers. And this poor mainlander Chinese had a problem with his car. And after dinner, all the Taiwanese left. And the mainlanders stayed together and helped this gentleman. And after that, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I said, you guys are so, I don't know what's the word to use. So I said, I'm a Chinese from Malaysia, and there are no Malaysians here. And therefore, if I have a problem in my car, I'll be stranded here. You see my point, that they still tend to click together. So every time I have a dinner together with this group of people, I have to say, you have to sit next to a person who is from your place of origin 5,000 miles away from each other, or 100 miles away from each other, to ensure that there is a certain amount of mixing around. Maybe I'm too tyrannical, but my point is I just want people to be able to get off the baggage. I'm sorry, got carried away.
That's fun. That's yeah, I think it's in a sense, in a way, it's very natural. You want to stick together with the people who have to share so much more similarity. You have more things to talk about, socialize, and more relaxed and everything. But on the other hand, you need to push yourself. I think this is what we need to do. You need to push yourself out of your own circle, the comfort zone, whatever, so that you find out more outside of your world, which is I think it's very important. But on the at the same time, I know people the people stuck together very often, like the visible minority, and then people will point their fingers, to see like these people, they're always stuck together. So it's a little bit of a it's like a social pressure too for us to break out for our own good, as well as really for your own good, so that you have a wider, bigger horizon. On the other hand, about the village, I think the village is, I think in the older generation especially, so important. If you happen to be from some of the well-established villages out in North America, wow, it's like they have a clan association. They had a long history of mutual help. During the exclusion period of time or whatever, they really help each other out. So this village, the concept is very important to them. So now they still carry over to say, where are you from? This little village. Like I myself, I'm from this Hakka clan. Oh, if you run into another Hakka, wow, you all like almost instant. You have the same dialect to share, and then all of a sudden, automatically, they think you have something, important in your history. So these are some of the Asian mentality, I think, and also about the mixed marriage. Years ago, more than maybe 10, 15 years ago, I read this book, and they had the statistics about the states. 40% or more at that time, the Asian Americans are already intermarriage with a non-Asian, 40%. So my daughter is married to a white person. So a lot of our friends are intermarriage. So it's, I hope this kind of difficulties, or the grandparents accepting or parents accepting, will gradually fade away because you're just seeing so much happening around you. And I used to think intermarriages is one way to achieve world peace. So I don't know, maybe we can still hope.
Thank you. I think Tomiko had her hand up.
I just wanted to say that it's a little past 8 o'clock. And if some of you want to leave, then you certainly are welcome. And I thank you very much for coming. If people want to continue talking, then that's fantastic. I'm just going to throw in a little bit of my blurb, because we do have another film night that's going to be coming up. And that will be on June 18th, Friday, June 18th. And this is in honor of National Indigenous Peoples Day, which is the following Monday. And we have now got the movie Unceded Chiefs. And the director will be coming to speak, Doreen Manuel. So, which is pretty amazing because she is like this top filmmaker, Indigenous filmmaker. She's the director. I mean, she's the director.
Oops. You've muted yourself.
You muted.
Oh, sorry.
At the end.
She's the director at the BOSA Center at CapU, and she is willing to come and speak to us about her movie. So I'm just so excited, and I hope you can all make it. A little bit of a gap till June 18th, but just keep that in mind.
Yeah, you have something to say. You get?
Yes. I hope I'm unmuted. Yes. When you talked about the village and the different villages and it was really interesting because in France, I come from a small village. And when I went to school, I was not speaking French. I was speaking the dialect. And so the same phenomenon happened. So of course, when I went to university, and then of course I met my husband, my ex, who was American, there was the same shock for them. Although he was white, he was blue-eyed, which was, like if you like my mother was a little bit more on the darker side, although she was not, but the ideal was blonde, blue-eyed. So it was interesting because for them it was a big shock. And of course I felt very guilty and so on. But anyway, I'm over that now. But the interesting part of what you said is that one day I was in Langley. I had a house in Langley, and I met a family who actually spoke my dialect. And that was just like, so we did speak, oh, where are you from, and blah, blah, blah. But, in your comments, like I reflected a lot about this phenomenon, about the village. And I remember in that village when the first Black person came, it was actually a veterinarian. My parents were farmers. It was actually a veterinarian. And they were, they never had seen someone that was Black in their whole life, even in the movies, because they didn't go to the movies anyway. So there was something completely new. And they were very nice. They were not, they were not aggressive, or they were not, but they were very uncomfortable. And they kind of tried to analyze, like, it smells different, and is, this or that. And so I think sometimes it's when something is different and is strange. And I think we don't have an excuse for being so uncomfortable, because it's important that we get to know the other, whoever they are. But I've had these experiences very early on, and I kind of understand where people are coming from. And you're right, education, and and of course I've been in the world. The other thing that I wanted to add to everything you said, because it totally reflect my own experiences. I've been in the Middle East. I've been, in many different parts, and a lot with Native people, with indigenous people in Mexico and Guatemala for, working there as a doctor. And anyway, the differences, there is differences, and even as a French person from France, I've encountered the sexism about the French woman. Somehow, we're supposed to be a certain way, liberated and everything. And so and the same thing is happening actually with Swedish women that come to France. They have the same sexism, really pronounced. And so it seems to be quite, it's just the differences and what we make of them. And there is, of course, the power issues. But the other thing also is the differences in what expected in different cultures. For example, the touching.
Mm-hmm.
In France, it's expected. You have to touch people. You have to,
That's right.
you know, you have to kiss people, and you have, which I think would be totally so uncomfortable for Canadian and North American. I mean, some anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So there are these differences that can bring problems when you first come, because you're used to do things a certain way. But like a very simple kind of stupid things is, you know, here, you know, if you go out for dinner, you know, you don't come before the time. Mm-hmm. Or if you invite someone, you really do invite, you know, but like sometimes people will say, yes, but you don't really mean it, you know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or you can, or here it's like you can drop by, but you know, no, you don't drop by. And when I first came here, I took it literally, because in France, that's what you do. You just drop by without calling or without, you know, I don't do that anymore because I realized it was not done. But that's what you do in France, for example. If someone says drop by, you actually drop by. So anyway, these little differences are, you know, thank you for letting me.
Yeah, this is very interesting, because I remember when I was working in Montreal, we have to go to meetings all the time. So, but every meeting, when you meet, you know, when you arrive, you see the people, you know, you kiss each other.
That's right. Yes.
And then, so there's sometime when before I leave the office to go to meeting, they say, oh, you're going to meeting? Oh, kissing time again. And then, you know, some people kiss one cheek, some of two,
or 2 and 3.
So yes. This is so cultural. It's the same thing, I think. You know, we need to be more aware of the differences, and not to think, oh, how strange, right?
Yeah.
The strangeness has to be normalized.
I actually, before I would like to ask a question. You don't have to answer, but ask yourself, or even, you know, you can ask your friends or family. When you see someone Asian, what first come to your mind? Do you see that person as nobody special, or you would think, oh, I don't know where she come from, or the person come from, or what is it that the first, when you see someone Asian on the street or at work, just encounter an Asian on the street, do you automatically assume that she's just fresh off the boat? Or, you know, what is it that come into your mind when you see an Asian face?
You mean
you don't have to say anything here, but just
no, it's a question for me, Mina?
No, for everyone.
For everyone, yeah. Well, for me, I mean, I have 2 grandchildren that are Chinese, and another one who is Black. So in my family, you know, and so I don't think. Well, and I work with refugees, so I think I would be curious about whatever they look like, if they look different, if they look, I think I would be curious about, I might not necessarily feel comfortable asking them, but I would be curious to know what their story, where they're coming from. They arrived recently or a long time ago, are they born here? But those are things that I would have on my mind to get to know them.
Good. Elizabeth, you have your hand.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mina. And to me, it really depends where I am. Like in Vancouver, it's so different because there's, to me, like when I look around, whites are in a minority. And so I mean, person of color, it just looks normal. If I'm at certain places in the Okanagan where I grew up, it's not the same. the distribution of the population is not the same. So if I was in one of the small, more rural areas there, it's very different because it's predominantly white. And so somebody will stand out, and I notice the difference that there's not that same broad cross-section of people as there is down here in the Vancouver area. So for me, it just depends on where.
The context, right?
The context, yeah.
Yeah.
You remind me of an experience that I had. I came from Toronto. In the city of Toronto, nobody ever looked at me really, you know, because there's so many people of different colors. One time I went to Burlington. This is a long time ago, before Burlington became predominantly South Asian. And so it was very white. I remember I walked in, I was taking my boyfriend's parents out for breakfast, brunch. And there's restaurants, all white folks and older too. And they were having their Sunday brunch, I guess, a family gathering. And everybody turned around and looked at me. I haven't received such reception. So you're right that where your location is so important, right? Like, yeah.
Catherine? Catherine, you have something to share?
Yes, I do have my hand up. I was going to say, I think what there are two different things we're talking about here. One is the cultural differences that cause us to be curious. But the other aspect that we're talking about is a culture which becomes established where white is better than anybody else. And white people feel they're entitled to make crude or ridiculous comments or stupid or and that is a cultural thing too, but it goes very deep, and it's a lot more than just curiosity about somebody else's culture. And I think we need to make sure we make that distinction when we're talking about this.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the question is how like for me, like I'm an Asian person, I'm the receiving end of the reaction from people who are looking at me. Some are just for pure curiosity because I do look different, but they are friendly. They are just very normal. And the other, with just from their mannerism, from their voice and the tone of speaking, I can tell, that is not an equal relationship right now, right offhand. So, but again, so the onus is on us. How do we react? How do we what do we want to engage into? Like educational to say, well, where are you really from? Things like that. Or just brush it off. And from those people who are curious and want to be friends, of course, we are happy or so happy about it. So it's a lot of, it is a lot of maneuvering and navigating, sometimes. So that can be very that can be distraction. So instead of having a normal carry on with a conversation, you have so many different kind of hidden messages. So this is the distraction that's really very heavy on us. Yeah, I can say that, because you don't know whether, so there we go again, right? Or shall I, seize this opportunity to do something more, or just brush it off? It's too much. I just don't want it at this moment. So these are the distraction, and that can be quite uncomfortable and demanding for time and energy. So that's what I think is Toni Morrison, the poet, who said, what's racism? Racism is distraction, to say the least. because it distracts you from what you want to go to do, and then take away the energy, the time, your hope, or your thing, so that to pull you down. I mean, that she goes on and on, which is very, very, very good to read. But this is how I feel. How do you feel, the rest of you?
Actually, I'm interested to chat with a guy like Richard. Do you have any experience with people asking where you're from? Like, what's the situation with you when you're being asked where you're from? Or are they women interested in you?
No, I think it's also guys interested in me.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course.
I don't really think, I don't get asked that as much, so I don't feel I do. So I just answer it, and it doesn't, I don't have as many negative feelings around that. I guess, at least I haven't thought about it. So, yeah, and I don't ask. Yeah, thinking back, I haven't been asking back, where are you from, or anything like that. So it's just maybe I just need another. Now that I'm more aware of it, I think I'll probably do that, right?
Yeah, throw it back. Yeah, the man today was like a little taken aback. He couldn't even answer me right away. He had to think about it.
So it's about 8:20 now. Would you like to stay till 8:30, or is it a good time for 8:30 to close? Because we can talk about the third comedy, which is by Jin Yao, this guy who's a stand-up comedian from Singapore. And I think that piece seemed to be more universal, talking about parents, talking about, you know, yeah, a little generational kind of thing. But one thing I did pick up, which is the stereotyping part that he picked up in his narrative. He said, oh, about the condom. He says, he said, we Asian guys, we don't reach puberty until 29. So condom is no use for us. Some Asian guys are really reacting to that, because now some of them do feel that they are being, stereotyping as like a not sexy, not sexual, and so they do have some problem with girlfriends. So so this is what, like, maybe this is where he picked it up from. Yeah. How about you? Anything else? Yes, Megumi?
I watch Japanese TV, TV Japan. Then one of the really popular programs, Cool Japan. It's two hosts. It's one Japanese guy, the other lady hostess is, I think her parents are mother married to American Caucasian, I think. But anyway, this program is very popular. Then the guests are all foreigner, do all kind of job in Japan, English teacher, or anyway, point is, those guests go and find out, what's very interest for them, for Japanese, culture. Then the one I like to say is, that theme was about sort of like how many boyfriend or girlfriend before you decided to marry. That was a very interesting theme for that night. Then even hostess, she was surprised, but all the foreign guests, they all said they have maybe 5 or 6 or 7, 8 dates before they marry, decided the person to marry. And that's normal, you know. Japanese host, even like a Japanese, and father is American Caucasian. Both are just shocked, you know. For Japanese, that's unthinkable, you know. So that was really like eye-popping experience for all the Japanese viewer, I think. You know, Japanese too, like arranged marriage, not arranged marriage, but you know, quite often try to parents or some older people try to help them to meet another date or something, you know, before they decide to marry. So anyway, that was Japanese my background, little talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Deborah.
Michael is raised his hand.
One of the rules about humor has to do with what they call punching up or punching down. If you're going to tell comedy, you should make fun of people who are higher than you. Yeah. You punch up. And you should not make fun of people who are more oppressed, weaker than you, punch down. Oh. I can't make jokes about women because it would be in rather bad taste. I can make jokes about white people because that's punching up. Now, it gets complicated. Now, can I make jokes about black people? Can I punch myself? And if I start making jokes about black people, am I reinforcing stereotypes? And then, in this BIPOC group, the trick is, can I make jokes about Chinese people? Are Chinese people above me or below me or at exactly the same level? I don't know. I'm going to err on the side of caution, and I'm not making any jokes about Chinese people. Yeah, comedy, Diane Brown mentioned at the very beginning, comedy is a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah. Thank you. Deborah.
Well said, Michael. I was going to say I really appreciated his piece, you know, when he was talking about his mom and the fact that he was talking about his karate lessons and she thought about that. That was just brilliant. It was really well done. Really well done.
This is true. Yeah, it's pretty universal too, right? It cuts across cultural and races. So that's fun. Yeah. Anybody else? I think if not, then we can close for the night. Yes?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Yeah. I'll see you next time.